বর্ণবাদ কিংবা রেসিজম এটি একটি বৈশ্বিক সমস্যা। দক্ষিণ এশিয়া থেকে শুরু করে ল্যাটিন আমেরিকা কোথায় নেই এই সমস্যা। মানুষকে ধর্ম, বর্ণ আর নানা বৈচিত্র্যের মাধ্যমে বিভেদ তৈরি করে মানুষের মধ্যে তৈরি করা হয়েছে ঘৃণা এবং হিংসা। আমরা এই বিষয়ে আজকে কথা বলবো। আমাদের সঙ্গে রয়েছেন ঢাকায় কর্মরত ইউনেস্কোর কান্ট্রি রিপ্রেজেন্টেটিভ ডক্টর সুশান ভাইস। তিনি আমাদের সঙ্গে যুক্ত হয়েছেন। আমরা তাকে পেয়ে সত্যি আনন্দিত। ওয়েলকাম টু আওয়ার শো।
Nice to be here and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming here. And we want to start our program with Bangladesh context. As you know that my first question is that how does UNESCO assess the current state of racial equality and social inclusion in Bangladesh, particularly in relation to ethnic minorities and marginalized communities?
It's a very interesting question because we try to utilize data as much as we can so that we can be a bit objective about this. So some of the key data that is collected on things like this includes the Religious Freedom Index and the Social Hostilities Index. And both of those point to particular issues in Bangladesh around ethnic minorities, religious freedoms, and tensions between the different groups. The UN's approach in general is to focus on building bridges though. So rather than looking at the issues and where things aren't working, we try to make sure that we're inclusive. So being inclusive, I think, is the first thing in terms of the UN approach and what UNESCO does. So you may notice when the UN holds a meeting, we always make sure we invite people from various minority groups. We try to make sure there are women. We try to make sure there are religious minorities. We try to make sure there are Indigenous people. So in terms of all of the UN's work, we might be working on the education policy. We want to make sure that all of those voices are heard in the policy development. It's very easy to leave people out. To give some specific examples of what we're doing more concretely to try to build understanding of other perspectives, we're working on projects on storytelling in minority languages. So UNESCO has a thing called the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, and here we've been working with groups from around the country to try to determine what are their priorities for sustaining their language, sustaining their culture, and the types of issues and barriers that they're dealing with. So we've been working particularly with young people to collect stories from the communities and to present those stories. So we have a collection of stories in Chakma language, in Kokborok, which is the Tripura language, and we've also presented those stories in Bangla and English because we want the average Bangladeshi to be able to understand the perspective of people from those communities. So really trying to bring people together so they can understand each other, because a lot of what happens with racial tensions is about misunderstanding and fear of the other. Fear that those people are bad or fear that they have motives that are not aligned with ours. But when we actually talk to them and find out about their priorities, we generally find that we have more in common. So opportunities to have projects where we bring people together like this are ways that we use to tackle racism. And that would be the approach that we try to use in most cases. So we bring people together and we always make sure that the different voices are able to be heard.
You said from UN part, are you satisfied with Bangladesh initiatives?
There's a lot of issues with, so for example, if I talk again about the languages, the Ministry of Primary and Mass Education has been trying to integrate 5 languages into the curriculum. They've worked on textbooks, but they haven't been able to address issues around how do you actually deliver this in classrooms. So what is often the case in Bangladesh is idealistically there's a willingness to address some issues, but in terms of implementation it isn't able to proceed particularly well. So it's not easy. How do you deliver these 5 languages in a classroom when the teacher only speaks Bangla?
Okay.
How do you deliver this in the classroom when there may be 3 Tripura students and 3 Chakma students and 4 Bengali students? They all speak different languages. So these are practical and difficult issues that need to be overcome, and the ministry has been working towards this, but the budget for education is small. How do you be able to implement these things given that you don't necessarily have the resources to specialize in these areas? Similarly, there's been a lot of work on global citizenship education in Bangladesh. This has been integrated into the curriculum. The idea of global citizenship education is exactly about understanding others. It's about what you and I have in common. I'm from Australia, you're from Bangladesh. We don't have to be enemies. What do we have that's in common that we could address? And global citizenship is looking at how we use culture, how we use sciences, how we use all of these things to understand each other better. World Heritage Sites, they're about understanding another culture. If you look at Bangladesh, you have somewhere like Baridhara, which is to do with the Mughal movement coming into Bangladesh, but you also have Parapur, which is a Buddhist vihara. So understanding Bangladesh's history, and that Bangladesh's history is not just about Islam, it's about the phases of Buddhism, the phases of Hinduism, and all of these different things that make Bangladesh what it is today.
Right.
These are the kind of tools that we like to use to address racism, because they're about building a positive society rather than focusing on the negative things.
As you perfectly said that budget shortage, I want to draw your attention on South Asia. How you evaluate South Asia's, perspective on racism?
I mentioned before the Social Hostilities Index and the Religious Freedom Index. If you look at those, India, Pakistan and Bangladesh all score as very in the top, or the worst 10, shall we say, in these particular indices.
Okay.
It shows that this is a common problem. The focus of the issue might be different. So for example, in India, it might be Hindu majority being racist against Muslim minority,
yes,
whereas in Bangladesh or Pakistan, it might be Muslim majority being racist
Hindu,
against
yes,
Hindu minority. So this is a common problem, and I think if you look at this is a global index, so it shows that these hostilities are very high compared to the whole world. To be in the top 10 means that these kind of tensions are very high in the country.
So Bangladesh, India and Pakistan, every country are in top 10.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. So this means we really need to work on this, building bridges, particularly with the religious communities. Another area that I would like to bring in on this is about gender-based violence. And I think that a lot of hostility is also directed at women. And this is common, again, across the South Asian countries. And you will see, if you look at any indices around this, these countries will all, it's interrelated. The racism, ethnic minorities are also present in the countries, religious minorities and gender. Women are often seen as a minority as well, even though they might be half of the population. They don't have half of the voice. So if we think about marginalized groups and people that don't have equal opportunity, women do definitely come up. And if you're from a minority, a religious minority or an ethnic minority, Indigenous woman, you have additional burdens because you carry both of the minorities. So I think that if we want to address racial discrimination, we also need to work on gender equality.
So you just talked about, on based on South Asian perspective, we have to worry about, religious minority and religious racism. But in case of color, in case of, brightness, what is your evaluation?
I think all of Asia, unfortunately, this leads to some bad things. There is a skin color issue in all of Asia. It's not just here. It's the same in East Asia. White skin is preferred, right, compared to dark skin. And that the strange thing is, for all of us coming from other countries, we actually think people with brown skin look nicer. So everybody in Australia wants to look brown and everybody in Bangladesh wants to look white. I honestly haven't seen that much racism on skin color in Bangladesh compared to, say, East Asia.
Okay.
I actually think it's obviously here, it's everywhere, it's in every country. But I think that the religious and the ethnic tensions are higher than the skin color tensions, if that makes sense.
You know, South Asian people and all over the world, social media is very famous and very popular now, and most of case of racism are being conducted in social media, in Facebook, in YouTube, in everywhere. So what is your assessment here?
Interestingly, misinformation has been around throughout the history of mankind. I think that the digital era that we're in now, and particularly social media, make it instant.
Okay.
And this means that it's much more difficult to control, and it can move so rapidly that it's very difficult to address. South Asia is very digitally connected. The number of, I think in Bangladesh, only around 50–56% of the population, according to statistics, have a mobile phone. But because I know a lot of people here share their phone. So if you're like living in a village here, there might only be one phone in the family, but multiple people are using it. So the statistics look a little bit lower than the actual access to social media. Like a family might be sitting around watching YouTube, but it's only coming up as like one person is connected. So although the statistics say only 56% of people have access to internet, I think it's actually higher in terms of number. The number of Facebook accounts and WhatsApp accounts, though, would probably be much higher per capita, because multiple people can have accounts without having their own dedicated internet. And we were talking with TikTok recently about the numbers, and it was much higher than I was expecting, because there are many people who aren't necessarily using these things on their own device. So we do have a big misinformation problem here. And I don't have the data, but recently in the election, for example, there were quite a few people who were tracking misinformation during the election. And, you know, there were a lot of things coming out, like one was that the election was postponed until April. This was one of the misinformations that was put around.
Yes.
And in fact, they used real footage of Professor Yunus talking about having the election in April, but that footage was like from a year or more than a year ago, when they were originally talking about that as a possible date.
Right.
So it looks very real. And this is one of the biggest issues with, particularly with AI now, the quality of the AI and what can be produced. And the mix of AI and reality makes it very difficult for people to determine what to believe in. So one of the things that we've been working on, we call it media information literacy. And this means, when we say literacy, being media and information literate means that you can analyze information, you can detect falsehood, you can know what is trustworthy, and you have a better idea when you're looking at an image, is it real, is it generated, can I trust it? Because if you're media and information literate, sharing information or what you respond to becomes a lot safer for you. It's better for you if you understand what you're reading. So it's for creators as well as receivers. So creators should also be aware of how the information could be misinterpreted. So we've been working with 14 universities in Bangladesh to create what we call MILNET BD, Media Information Literacy Network Bangladesh. Okay. And they're actually working with the faculty and the students to promote this media information literacy. And with the idea being that university students are particularly connected on social media. It's a big part of the life of the average 20 or 22-year-old in Bangladesh. Everybody has Instagram, everybody has Facebook, everybody's using WhatsApp. So it's really important that they understand when they use that, how to safeguard themselves from misinformation and how to be a responsible creator. The idea, so the network at the moment is doing things like we're doing an Olympiad with the universities for them to actually bring forward their ideas on media information literacy. We're also working with faculty to develop training on media information literacy modules that are adapted from global modules to be delivered in universities here. And I think the next stage for us, we're looking at developing something to go into the school curriculum, particularly for high school students. You will know here that people start using social media even as babies,
Yes.
because something like Sesame Street, parents let their kids watch Sisimpur on their YouTube, on their phone or something. So they're starting very young. So media information literacy needs to start before you're 18 or 19 when you're at university. You need to actually start understanding this at a younger age.
We will talk on it again. দর্শক, আমরা শুনছিলাম সুজান ভাইজ তার কাছ থেকে তা আমাদের যে বর্ণবাদের সমস্যা রয়েছে আমাদের দক্ষিণ এশিয়ায় এবং পুরো বিশ্বে এবং ডিজিটালি কিভাবে আমাদেরকে ক্ষতিগ্রস্ত করছে সেসব বিষয় নিয়ে আমরা ফিরছি ছোট্ট একটি বিরতির পর। দর্শক, বিরতির পর আবার ফিরে এলাম। আমাদের সঙ্গে আছেন ঢাকায় নিযুক্ত ইউনেস্কোর কান্ট্রি রিপ্রেজেন্টেটিভ ডক্টর সুজান ভাইজ। তিনি আমাদের সঙ্গে কথা বলছিলেন ডিজিটাল মাধ্যমে কিভাবে বর্ণবাদ ছড়ানো হচ্ছে, বর্ণবাদের বিষাক্ত দাঁত কিভাবে আমাদের মানুষত্বের মধ্যে আঘাত আনছে, কিভাবে এই দক্ষিণ এশিয়া সহ সারা বিশ্বে বর্ণবাদের কারণে মানুষ ভুগছে। ওয়েলকাম ব্যাক টু আওয়ার শো, and our next question to you, that young people in Bangladesh and across the global south are increasingly vocal about equality and justice. How can UNESCO empower youth leadership to turn anti-racism from an annual observance into sustainable social transformation?
I think Bangladesh is one country, it's the country that I've been in that has the most youth activism that I think I've seen anywhere. There's so many youth that are really passionate about causes from climate change to mental health, and peace, justice and security is amongst those. So I think that for a start we're in a good position in Bangladesh in terms of youth wanting to be part of solutions for something like this. We have been working to try to see how we could have youth voices more integrated into the government's decision making. So part of the issue we have in most countries is that youth activism is happening over here and government decision making is happening here. We would really like,
which we call black box.
Oh, do
black
you?
box theory.
Okay. Well, we would like to connect the two, because you know I think July 2024 showed that youth want to be heard.
Okay.
And this is really important. So some of the specific things that we will be doing with young people, we already have a youth advisory group at the UN, and what we're asking them to do this year is to do some research into the key themes about building a sustainable future for Bangladesh. So we've tried some research projects in the last couple of years. We've done one on mental health and one on climate change. This year, as we move forward to, you know, the new 5-year plan for Bangladesh, the new UN plan for cooperation framework we call it, we want young people's voices to be reflected in that. We're also trying to develop a strategy called Youth Peace and Security. This is a global initiative that actually it came out of things like, you know, child soldiers and some of those things that happened during times of war, but the youth peace and security agenda is bigger than that, and obviously security issues are here in Bangladesh. We had the uprising 2 years
Yes.
ago. Youth peace and security will be about how do we address the underpinnings to stop things like that happening. That will include racial discrimination, religious freedom, gender equality and all of those things, but the idea of that will be very much developed as a partnership with youth, and we hope that this will feed into things like the National Youth Policy, whatever we can do in terms of strengthening the way the government interacts with youth, as I said at the beginning, because it's really about making that conversation happen. Just like I said at the beginning, we want to bring in minority voices to any discussion. We want to bring in youth voices to these discussions too. These will be the leaders of the future, the decision makers for Bangladesh. If they can start to make this change in the way that people view others and be more accepting and open-minded about people of different races, different religions, different economic backgrounds, and they can build initiatives that address those, the underpinning issues, then I think Bangladesh will be in a very good place in the future to have a set of leaders that are much more familiar with these things and can integrate them into what the government is doing, what the private sector is doing, and social initiatives as well.
But I think you noticed that in last election we got I think 4 MP member of parliament from youths who led the July uprising. I can name them, but there is no necessary to name them. So do you think that it can help us, you know?
I do actually, you know, there's a movement, there's a global movement to actually have young people elected from local government up to national parliaments and to be the youth voice there. And I think it's really important. I think it's also really important that those young people learn more about governance and politics, because it's not an easy thing to do. You come in as a student or a student leader, and going into the government it's a very different thing.
Okay.
The way the government works. So I think that this is actually,
Without any experience.
yes, I think that this is really positive for Bangladesh in terms of building future leaders.
Thank you, Dr. Susan Wise, for coming here and for your insightful information and views. দর্শক, আমাদের সঙ্গে ছিলেন দীর্ঘক্ষণ সময় ধরে আমাদের সঙ্গে ছিলেন ডক্টর সুসান ভাইস। তিনি ঢাকায় ইউনেস্কোর কান্ট্রি রিপ্রেজেন্টেটিভ হিসেবে কাজ করছেন। তিনি আমাদেরকে জানাচ্ছিলেন কিভাবে বর্ণবাদ মানুষের মনুষ্যত্বকে ধ্বংস করছে এবং এটা কিভাবে কখনো ধর্ম কখনো বর্ণ হিসেবে মানুষের মধ্যে ঘৃণা ছড়াচ্ছে। আজকের মতো এই ছিল আমাদের এই অনুষ্ঠানে। আগামী পর্বে আমাদের সঙ্গে থাকার জন্য সকলকে আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি।